The year is 1956, the end of steam for all railroads on the East Coast. I, as a young lad back in the day, tried to find every scrapyard that had the PRR steam engines lining up, waiting to be scrapped, waiting for someone to come save them. In the end, none did. However, the memories of these engines can be preserved with rail fans like me, who came to see them in their last moments, waiting to be taken apart. By the time I arrived, some were already taken apart. Some had their piston rods already disconnected. Some were nothing but pipes being recycled. Some had their tenders missing. Some of them were tenders without the engines. Some of them had nothing but mangled parts. Although one engine stood out of the several dozen T1s, Mountain Types, and Pacifics, there was one Atlantic. A heavy Atlantic. Interesting to see an E6 wind up here. Yeah, sure is, pal. This engine I've come to know for a while now, for the wrong reasons. Well, what happened? It started out when steam was king. There was once a very legendary engineer on the Pennsylvania Railroad, John Thornburg. He was one of the railroad's finest, and perhaps even the best at the passenger services. Wherever he was, the passengers wanted to travel on him more than any other engineer. Jack commanded other locomotives in his lifetime, but the one he was most known for was E6 169. Because of his talents, people loved him, but some people envied him. And one of them being David Turpitz. David was a freight engineer on the same railroad, and he envied Jack's success, saying he'd kill to be in Jack's shoes, even if it was only for one day. Well, what happened next? He stuck to his words. Instead of taking the long way to get promoted to Jack status, he decided to make things quick. One night in 1949, he decided to make his plan to kill him. On Jack's last run of 169, he was the engineer and David was the fireman. With a blow of the whistle, Jack left his last station ever. 169 left the station, smoothly and swiftly, exactly how Jack wanted. David, he was complying with his orders until he found the perfect chance to strike. Jack was known for making his runs very punctual because he always put his engines at the speed limit on the tracks, and he was very good at keeping that because he made sure he didn't go too slow or too fast. It was a moonlit night and the tracks were clear. David had little previous experience as a fireman, and as such, he shoveled coal perhaps a little too much. Whether that was intentional or not remains to be seen. Whilst he was shoveling coal, depleting the coal supply, he picked up a brick in his pocket and threw it into the firebox while Jack wasn't looking. Jack didn't see the brick, and he thought that the firebox had buckled, and he stopped the train. Alright, let's see what's happened here. There's no hole in the thing. David, you check out for external damages. I'll look for internal damages. Wait. David?
God, help me!
The poor man fell into the firebox of his very own engine, roasting alive, begging for help. But of course, murderers don't come to the aid of their victims, and as such, David became the engineer and fireman of 169 for one night and one night only. Listening to the man that he envied so much beg him for mercy. By the time 169 reached his final destination, Jack's cries were all but silent, and his body was never found. Though this run was the end of 169 and David's good fortune. 169 turned from a smooth, functional engine to a rough rider that barely had enough steam pressure to keep on going. They could never solve the problem. Although on several occasions, people that were around 169 would hear Jack's voice spit out random words towards random people. But whenever David passed by, or someone that looked like him, he would always say, guilty. David's life also went down the drain. He became extremely accident-prone, and last year, he got fired. After he ended up rear-ending another train that almost cost his life. And he's been living in hardship ever since. It hasn't been too long since he was fired. But it also wasn't too long ago that 169 was retired after being demoted to several smaller services. And now here she sits, rusting away at an alarming rate. No parts are taken from this point onward. She is now doomed to rust. But unlike her speedy sisters, 169 will now be known as the Brazen Bull of the tracks. Dear God, man. Just goes to show that lust for power will not get you anywhere. True. I'm just gonna see the rest of the scrap line. You seem like a hermit. Oh, Jack. I guess you weren't that good of an investment after all. After all, it wasn't worth losing an eye to be like you. You are guilty.